Before President Trump bulldozed a third of the White House last week, he had already paved over one of its most beautiful and iconic places, the White House Rose Garden.
Tourists flocked to the White House today to see for themselves the demolition of the historic East Wing.
In order to do it properly, we had to take down the existing structure.
You know, when you think of the White House, you think of the People's House, a symbol of American democracy. But what if I told you that very symbol is being quietly rebuilt, not by the public, but by private money? Today, we're going to dig into how corporate and billionaire dollars are literally reshaping the White House and what that really means for all of us.
So this is the core of it right here. You have this idea of the White House belonging to every single American. But then you have this new reality where these huge, legacy-defining projects are being paid for by a very small group of incredibly wealthy people and corporations. And that's the real tension we're going to explore. What happens when a public house is rebuilt with private hands?
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the changes that got everyone talking in the first place. Then we're going to follow the money, see who's actually footing the bill for all this. After that, we uncover a family connection that is, well, it's pretty wild. We'll get into the big debate over this new way of doing things, and then wrap it all up with the biggest question of all: who really gets to shape the people's house? So where does a story this big even begin? Well, funny enough, not with some huge announcement, but in a garden. A few pictures of a very famous backyard started making the rounds, and that's what kicked off a huge national conversation and revealed something much, much bigger was happening just out of sight. Okay, so what you're seeing here is a tale of two gardens. The historic Rose Garden, the one designed by the legendary Bunny Mellon for Jackie Kennedy, was all about this lush, soft feel. You know, grass, tons of flowers, these beautiful old trees. The new look, it's different. It's much more structured. We're talking wide stone walkways, bright umbrellas. It's definitely ready for a party. Critics immediately jumped on it, saying it had a Mar-a-Lago vibe, while supporters said, hey, it's just a practical, much-needed update.
The fight over the garden was all over the news, but here's the thing. It was just the opening act. It was a distraction from a much, much bigger drama happening just a few feet away that was about to blow people's minds.
That's right. While everyone was arguing about roses and stone pavers, demolition crews were starting to tear down the historic East Wing. This was home to the First Lady's offices, a ton of key staff, and what's replacing it? A gigantic 90,000 square foot ballroom. I mean, think about that. This isn't just a paint job. This is a massive change to the White House as we know it. Now, usually a project of this size would mean a huge debate in Congress about taxpayer money, but that's not what happened here. And that brings us to the most important part of this whole story. We have to follow the money.
And what a price tag it is. We're talking about an estimated $300 million. And get this, every single cent is being raised not from the public, but from private donors.
So who are these donors?
Well, the fundraising has been pretty active. We're talking about some of the biggest names in the tech world, major defense contractors, and other super wealthy individuals. And that, of course, immediately raises some huge questions about transparency, right? Who exactly is giving all this money, and maybe more importantly, what could they be expecting in return?
At the exact same time all this is happening, another story about private money funding the government hits the news. On the surface, it seemed completely random and unrelated, but stick with me here, because it turns out to be a critical piece of the puzzle.
So during a government shutdown, the Pentagon did something pretty much unprecedented. It accepted a $130 million gift from a private citizen to help pay U.S. soldiers. Now, it was just a fraction of what was needed, but the idea itself, a private citizen stepping in to fund a core duty of the government, was just extraordinary.
It didn't take long for the donor's name to come out, Timothy Mellon. He's a very reclusive heir to a massive banking fortune and a huge player in political financing. His gift just threw gasoline on the fire of the debate about the role of billionaires in funding the government itself.
And this, right here, is where our two stories, the controversial garden and that unprecedented military donation, are about to crash into each other in a way that nobody could have predicted, all thanks to one very famous, very rich family.
Okay, so let's rewind for a second. Remember the name behind that classic Rose Garden design? The person whose legacy everyone was arguing about? That was Bunny Mellon.
And the billionaire who just wrote a check for $130 million to the Pentagon? That was Timothy Mellon. Two huge stories, two major injections of private cash into public affairs, one last name. And there it is. Bunny Mellon was Timothy Mellon's step-grandmother. I mean, you really can't make this stuff up. This wild connection just turned the whole thing into this powerful symbol. You had the legacy of one Mellon being argued over in a garden, while the fortune of another was being used to fund the actual military. It was just this shocking example of how deeply elite private money is woven into our public life.
So this brings us to the real debate. Beyond the architecture, beyond the crazy family drama, this whole situation forces us to have a much bigger conversation about the rules, about secrecy, and about the kind of example this sets for the future. We're moving from the what happened to the why it all matters.
All right, let's look at both sides of the argument, because everyone's got a point. Supporters say, look, this is a smart way to modernize the White House without spending a single taxpayer dollar. And they're right when they say presidents have always made changes. But opponents see a really dangerous path here. They're worried about the hidden influence of donors, about skipping all the normal public review processes, and about blurring the line between taking care of a public trust and just letting rich people get what they want.
You know, when you strip away all the noise, this whole thing really boils down to three huge questions. First, transparency. Who are all the donors and what kind of strings might be attached to their money? Second, process. Were all the historic preservation and planning rules actually followed, or were corners cut? And third, precedent. Does this make it normal for billionaires to just fund government projects? And does that weaken the public's say in what happens?
Okay, let's try to wrap our heads around all this. After looking at the reporting, the history, and all the controversy, where does that leave us? Let's quickly recap what we know for sure, what's still a big mystery, and the fundamental question that's still hanging in the air.
So these are the cold, hard facts. Not up for debate. The Rose Garden looks different. Demolition for a privately funded ballroom in the East Wing is happening. That ballroom is going to cost around $300 million. And yes, the Pentagon took a $130 million gift from Timothy Mellon. These things we know for sure.
But, and this is a really big but, the documents that could answer our most important questions, they're not public. We're talking about the complete donor lists, the legal terms of their donations, the final approved building plans. Without those, we're really only seeing a small piece of the whole story.
And that leaves us right here, with this one final central question. And it goes way beyond gardens and ballrooms. It's really about ownership, it's about influence, and it's about the future of our most important public symbols. In a democracy, who gets to shape the people's house? With whose money and under what rules? That's the question we're all left with.